didn't want to pay attention to the story, but okay. So the origins of the LMI, the PMI.
Origins of the LMI. So the Purchasing Managers Index, which is an incredible tool, and it was really developed a very long time ago by Dr. John Hoagland, who was at Michigan State. He passed away probably 15 years ago. He was in his 90s. And Dr. Hal Fearon, who was his PhD student in the late 50s and then graduated, I think, in 61. Dr. Fearon graduated and came out to Arizona State University, where I'm at now, and really started establishing procurement as an academic discipline out there. Really was the beginning of, we didn't call it that back then, but it was really the beginning of supply chain management at ASU a long time ago. So there's been this Michigan State ASU connection for a long time. I'm one of those. I grew up in Lansing and then did all my work in East Lansing and then went to ASU 10 years ago. I mean, I've been a professor for 35. And so the PMI original design of it was because of how important manufacturing was. And Dr. Hoagland thought you could look at steel production in the United States and kind of tell the future. So a lot of it was around that idea. And it's great, but it was always a little light on the logistics components. And so I've been thinking about it. Dr. Hoagland used to keep me after class, 1981, Michigan State, and talk to me about it. He'd say, Rogers, you got to stay here. I said, okay. And I would sit there. And he was a really brilliant, but also crazy guy. Had all these different ideas, and was a true character, a true eccentric professor. And so I've been thinking, though, that the PMI doesn't really focus on the logistics components. And the logistics components can really also tell you the future. So before something goes into GDP, which is a lagging indicator, before it goes into GDP, it goes on a truck or a train or a ship. It goes into inventory. It sits on a shelf in a warehouse, which is when it's in inventory. And so if you look at changes in prices, capacity utilization for both transportation and warehousing, obviously transportation prices move faster than all the other components, but you kind of need of all those together, and then inventory amounts and costs, what's happening there. So we blend those 8 components together, and that is the LMI, and it tells you 2 or 3 months ahead of what GDP is going to tell you 4 months later, but of where it hits the consumer. It's telling you what's happening. The other piece of it is the PMI, which I love the PMI, and they helped us figure out how to do the LMI over there at ISM. The PMI mostly is business to business. It's both, I think on the first business day of the month, the manufacturing PMI comes out, and the third, the services one. It's very valuable information. But we also look at upstream and downstream, as you know, from reading the PMI, and we started doing that in 2018, and I was going to have to be on a national radio show talking about FedEx missing their earnings in September of 2018. And I was thinking, man, I should listen to the conference. So I listened to the conference call. Fred Smith is, an older guy. He was trying to be in the background a little bit. But finally, at about 34 minutes into the call, he gets on and he goes, look, guys, the real problem is that FedEx is more business to business than business to consumer. And you're all talking about how hot the consumer was back in 2018, but we're mostly business to business. It's the supply chain economy, not that downstream. And so I thought, I talked to the other sort of main guy that works on the LMI, my son, Dr. Zach Rogers. And I said, we should do upstream and downstream. And so we've been doing it since then, and we also did it retroactively back to 2016. And it's been really interesting because capturing both the upstream part, but then also that last mile to the consumer tells you a ton. And if one gets out of sync with the other, you know, the either there's going to be a downturn or the upstream part's going to have to catch up with the downstream. And so it's been a really fun thing to do, but we started it because I've been thinking about a potential LMI. Zach said when he was walking out, he graduated with his PhD in August of 2016. We started in September of 2016. He said, Dad, you know that thing you've been talking to me about my whole life? I'll do it with you. And so it's Dr. Zach Rogers from Colorado State, who does most of the work. It's Dr. Stephen Carnevale, who was a PhD student of mine at Rutgers. It's Dr. Shen Yenyert, who is an associate dean now at Rutgers. And I hired him at Nevada years and years ago, and then we were both at Rutgers together. And Dr. Ron Lemke, who worked on reverse logistics with me at the University of Nevada. So it's all those guys, and it's been a real fun labor of love. And it comes out the first Tuesday of every month, and we really like people to see it and think about it. And if there's something they don't agree with, I love hearing about that too. So
Awesome.